All right, welcome, Melissa Osborne. This is our first time back in a while. We took a little break. I've been sick. I had a bunch of stuff happen. And then, Sammy, we have a new producer, so we're here. And I said, Sammy, you have to get Melissa on. Melissa and I we go back to 2006 to 2008.
Yeah, right around there.
That's why I was there for 2 years. So we both worked at Deckert, which was it's a international law firm in their Hartford office doing finance work. And then we'll get into this, that we both have thriving family law practices. So like you and I are, I don't know what's the word, simpatico, like we have a very similar career path. And there's nobody that has that. Nobody that I know in our bar has played at the level, like big law, went from big law to trial lawyer.
And we got there in very different ways.
In very different ways. So I want to explore that because, right, I mean, we went from sitting at a desk and reviewing 200-page credit agreements to, 3-day trials arguing motions in limine. Like what that takes to do that. Because, and that shouldn't be like underappreciated or underrated. Like to go from playing at the level where you're negotiating 200-page credit agreements and legal opinions and literally not knowing where the courthouse is, to now arguing, the hearsay exceptions on a trial, and you're dealing with real people, not venture capitalists and big institutional clients. And to make that switch, and not just to make it, but to do it well, is probably, to me, it verges on the impossible.
It's a completely different career. It's like going from cardiology to, I don't know, neuroscience.
Completely different thing. So we'll talk about that. I want to learn a little bit about your background. You are obviously a lawyer. That's what you do for your primary practice. Where did you grow up? Where did you live when you were a kid?
So I was born in Manhattan. I'd have theater people and music people for parents.
Oh, nice.
And my dad stayed in New York. He's an opera critic. And
wow.
I was born on, West 78th Street in a rent-controlled apartment back when the Upper West Side was like a dangerous art scene.
So this makes a lot of sense about you now. Like you have that, but you have some grit to you, which is the people, everyone I know that's born in New York, like they have a grittiness.
I was talking to a reporter the other day at the legislature, and he said something. He was like, well, you've got hard elbows or something. He'd say, but you do divorce law. I'm like, I'm just a New Yorker. It's not about divorce. I'm just a New Yorker.
That's right. Right. That's just, you're right. You're just adorable because you know how the New York lawyers practice.
Exactly.
They're animals.
Exactly. But then I moved, couldn't be more different, to rural Vermont. I'm talking
with your mom?
With my mom and my stepdad, and like more cows than people in that.
Like rural Vermont and what?
Cambridge, Vermont, up north of Burlington.
Wow. Okay.
So lived there for several years.
And what age is this?
So from 4 to 10.
Okay.
9, I lived in Vermont.
But you're going back to see Dad.
Yep. I was going back to see Dad and my grandparents, my aunt who were there. But I had these very different, going to the opera with Dad and, learning how to weld and climbing trees and skiing when I'm in Vermont. So very different lives. And then we ended up, my mom lost her job. She was working at Goddard College down in Plainfield by then. And then we moved down to Miami.
Wow.
Miami. So.
And she was a professor?
No, she was a writer, a publicist.
Oh, right, okay.
A roving creative. She'd been an actress.
Roving creative, that's a good line.
Yeah, no, that woman could hustle. Like she could put something together.
Right.
Well,
she's smart, she could write.
She was very smart. She had a lot of hustle.
Well-read.
Very well.
So she can find a job.
It's not even find a job. She could make it.
Oh, interesting.
She could hustle it together. Her job would be teaching theater and doing children's theater.
Because she had so many skills, right?
And doing a one-woman show singing, and then she'd be doing an Ibsen thing.
Wow.
And so, somehow she cobbled together a living with these 3, Ruffigan children.
And then Miami at what age?
Miami was like 5th, 6th, and 7th grades.
Okay.
And then I did 1 year of public school. My mom went and moved north, went to a boarding school to teach.
Right.
And I did 1 year of public school in Manhattan. And then the point of going to, with my dad, and then 1 year, the point of her going to a boarding school was that I would have this phenomenal private school to go to. And I did the actress thing for a while in Manhattan. I was on the road in an equity tour at the age of 20. But there are people who are mine.
These are musicals?
Musicals, yeah. Did Annie.
You did Annie? Annie?
I did Annie in the dinner theater in Ohio.
Oh my God.
And that was it was a big deal, like to land an equity tour at that age.
Yeah.
And I realized that there are people who are my age now who are still doing dinner theater in Ohio.
Right.
And they're making a living at it.
But they're not
Their
killing
personal
it.
lives are messed because they've got to do dinner theater.
And they're living out of a hotel.
Exactly. And I didn't want that. And I went back and I finished my degree. I worked during the day at a television research programming company. And I went to college at night at Hunter College.
Oh, yeah.
And I got my degree in poli-sci. And I really wanted to go to law school, but I also really didn't want the law school debt. So I did everything. I took a job on Wall Street, got a Series 7 in 63. I did a muni bond broking.
Wow.
I did foreign currency exchange. I was really, really bad at options. They required math. Math wasn't my thing. Then I decided, what was I doing? I was doing real estate. I was just trying everything I could to avoid law school debt. And I decided I wanted to go. And I applied to take a non-matriculated class at New York Law School.
NYLS.
New York, NYLS. Best law school on Worth Street. And I got a call on back when we had answering machines, right? So I called it my answering machine. And that said, well, we'd like to, because I had taken my LSATs years before when I was thinking about it. And they said, well, we got your, your transcript and we got your LSATs and we still have some spaces in our 1L class.
At NYLS.
Yeah. And so I called them back and I said, well, thank you very much. But, I don't have any money. I was not planning on going to law school right now. And they said, well, that's okay. We'll give you a half tuition scholarship.
I got your attention.
I said, okay. I said, well, but I'm also on vacation. I'm in like Hawaii. I won't make it back. They said, it's just a couple of days of orientation. Don't worry about it.
So you did it.
So I said, okay, well, what can happen, right? And when you go, at least back then, when you went to New York Law School, and it's come up in the rankings since then.
Oh, I almost went there. I was obsessed with that place.
Yeah. So, and it's right down in the heart of Manhattan near all the courts.
Yeah.
And when you go to a non-top ranking school, you just have to make sure that you are in the very top percentile.
That's right, and you're fine.
And I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew exactly where I wanted to go. And I made sure I was in the very top percentile. I ended up graduating,
but then you ended up at Wild Gotchel.
Well, that's where I wanted to go.
Well, that's again,
exactly where I wanted to go.
And I think that's something that it's so funny because I was talking we were sort of prepping for this a little bit, and I was talking to Jilly in our office, and I said, oh God, I've known Melissa for a long time. I said, do you know that Melissa went to Wild Gotchel? And she said, what's that? I said, it's like being drafted out of high school for like the number one team. I mean, it's the.
Yeah.
You have to be a smart motherfucker to go there. And I mean that like with all sincerity.
You.
No, you have to be like, you also have to be a little nuts because it's like you work like an animal.
You do. You work like an animal.
But you get incredible training.
You get phenomenal training.
And they don't suffer fools. If you fall by the wayside or you don't
you're out.
You're out.
You're out. You're absolutely out. And what I did is I summered there and I had wanted to become an employment law attorney. And I realized, and back then, Wild Gotchal wrote the employment law
wrote the book.
column for the New York Law Journal. So I said, that's where I want to go. And I got there and I went through my employment law rotation. And I realized very quickly that if I was going to be doing employment law at that level, I was not going to be working on the side that I wanted to support.
They do management only.
And as it turned out, I also didn't actually like the practice of it. It's a lot of constitutional law, a lot of burden shifting. And it just didn't float my boat on the day-to-day practice things you do. And I went through the real estate department and I had a phenomenal time. And turns out I'm really, really detail-oriented. I care about where commas go and whether the comma is a semicolon or a comma.
Whether the comma is italicized.
Exactly, right? And where's the underline?
They'll catch you on that.
Oh, it's absolutely. And
But by the way, AI is going to destroy all them on that.
I know.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other conversation. We're going to get to it.
Well, yeah.
But I also got this phenomenal mentor. He was at the time the chair of the real estate department, and he just took a shine to me. And he wasn't, you hear about big law partners harassing young women. None of that happened to me. Maybe I should be offended. I don't know. But none of that happened to me.
Person.
He was a decent person. And he just saw something in me, and he sort of took me under his wing. And I got the offer from them and I deferred. I went to the Court of Appeals. I did a clerkship there. And in New York State, the Court of Appeals is what we call our Supreme Court here in Connecticut. So, another feather in the cap. And then after that, went back to Wild Gotchal. And I think, and you tell me your experience on this, but I think that the reason, I'm not going to say it was easy, because I left corporate real estate and private equity real estate when the market crashed. And everybody, like our clients had lost their jobs way before law firms started laying people off, but there kind of wasn't a choice. And I was doing pro bono work in juvenile court at that point in time.
What year is this? What year did you graduate law school?
I graduated law school in 1997.
All right, so you're a little ahead of me. I'm 2000.
Yep, 97. And so I think that the reason, I'm not going to say it was easy to make the shift to litigating. I'd never litigated before. I was terrified, hadn't seen the inside of a courtroom. My entire career, that was it, right? But the level of training that you and I got at Big Law, you have clients who have enough money to pay you to care about where the commas go.
That's right.
Right? Who will pay you to do 14 drafts of negotiation with the other side. And I don't know about you, I was exposed very early on to a lot of client contact. So I had a lot of confidence. You know, my mentor would take me with him to big meetings. I flew to Hawaii with John Gray of Blackstone.
Oh, wow.
You know, so we were at Blackstone at the time. I did a lot of hotel JVs. And it gave me confidence. It gave me a level of detail that I think when you start out working for humans, most humans can't afford to pay you to be that detail oriented, to do 14 drafts, to care about what the comma is. And I remember my mentor, Alan Pomerantz, every single thing I did had to go by him. And I will remember this always, walking to his office. I was like a third year or something like that. And I put a cover letter with something on his desk in his bin where he would look at things. And I came back into my office and it was sitting on my chair and there were no markups on it. And I went back in and I said, "Oh, of these things you gave me, you must have missed this one." He said, "No, I saw that." I said, "But there are no markups on it." He said, "Oh, only took you 3 years." So,
oh, that's funny.
So, I mean, he would down to the level of, no, the via FedEx gets an underline.
That's right.
Back when we had to FedEx because
that's right.
email was
via FedEx.
Right.
By the way, it's so funny because just as a quick little quick rabbit hole, I would bet you a day's pay that if you and I just put out a laptop here and asked to write a letter to somebody and we handed it, exchanged it, it would be the same format.
Yeah.
There's a big law format. It starts with via electronic mail, via FedEx. It's underlined in bold.
Absolutely.
It has the date.
Yeah.
And then it has the date there, and then you have the letter, and it's like a certain thing. And then if anything, here's the question for you. If something's defined, it's bolded, right?
Bolded and
quotes. But the quotes aren't bolded.
No.
That's right. See?
No.
And it's Times New Roman 12. Yep.
Yeah.
It's a thing. It's
right. So I think that having had that level of training, it just stays with you.
It does.
So while you and I may have been scrambling to learn where the courthouse was, remember and learn the rules of evidence, and to figure out how to litigate and learn a whole new topic, family law, we had this phenomenal training underneath us that kind of carried us and buoyed us through that.
For sure.
So now that we have, I'm not going to say mastered because that's kind of cocky, but now that we have a fairly decent understanding of the case law and where the court is and how to run a judicial philosophy and also just knowing the judges in each court, where you practice, it's a huge benefit, right? But underneath all of that, which every family law attorney has, we have this extra layer of training that is uncommon to find in this area of the law.
Most of our colleagues don't have.
Exactly.
Right. Where it's, look at this, it has to be done right. There's a level of detail that needs to be followed.
Right.
Also, people don't realize sometimes, like in court, you could go out and you just add a line and everyone's signing it on the back of your back. You know, like,
literally.
You need that because you just want to get the people out of there. You're like, we're done with this. Like, your life has to move on.
Right.
And we're not going to go back to my office and I'm going to send you a red line. We're doing it right here. We're typing it up. I'm emailing it to my Gmail in the court, printing it up.
In the court service center.
In the court services center. And I'm like scanning it through. I'm faxing it to my office. Like, you got to also be gritty. You got to be able to do
it on
that
the fly.
and know that sometimes like that's all that's needed because you need to get the people out of the court because the court is not a good place for people most of the time.
Most of the time it's not.
It can be a fine place. It needs to be a place to adjudicate when somebody's taking positions that are just like, well, I'm not. If you're taking that position, what do I got to lose?
You have to do it right. And also, and when you and I were talking about this before we turned on the cameras, but you have to be willing and able to try a case. There's a concept that family law, it's more like social work than law. And I despise that, right? I despise that. Yes, you have to have empathy. Yes, you have to understand that it's more than just the law. It is these people's lives, and you're caring about their children, or you're caring about the outcomes, you're caring about, will they be able to survive in retirement after this? But within that, it is not the empathy that sees you through to a good result. It is a strong underpinning of what is the law, right? Because that gets you to the best results when you know it. And oftentimes the other attorney doesn't, right?
That's right.
Oftentimes they don't know what the case law is. They don't know how to take a deposition. I've settled cases simply by sending a deposition notice.
Right. It's still funny because even on the deposition stuff, like some lawyers, and I always view this as a weakness, they're like, they get into huff and puff about something, or they're upset that your client's not budging, and they're like, send me dates for depositions. I write back and I say, you think deposition bothers me?
Yeah.
I said, depositions will be like eating a cheeseburger.
That.
Like,
I listen to a lot of deposition podcasts.
Yeah.
Just to keep it all fresh, right?
And the difference between, people don't realize this in family law. Our friends that are true civil litigators, they can win a case on deposition.
That's where most of them happen, right?
And
that's
you literally
happen.
And that's why deposition podcasts exist, because literally you can have a case end by what happens at the deposition.
Absolutely.
Whereas for us, it won't end because, the joke is people come in like, do you win your divorce case? I said, well, I win every one of them. We get divorced.
Right.
The question is, where does it go? And so and what people, again, another little quick tidbit about this, people don't realize, I say to people, we can take your case and try it in front of 5 judges.
And get 5
results. And you know what? They'll all be upheld on appeal.
Yes, and that's scary.
Because the judge has all the discretion in the family court. So, but I think that, and we talked about a little this before the camera, I think that the secret, at least I'm finding, is I am going to use deposition practice. Nobody else is doing this.
It's trial practice too.
But you can use that deposition practice to win your case or to get a more favorable result, I should say, in the family court, because the lawyers aren't preparing. They're just using it as info gathering. They're not pushing enough. They're not using the AI tools that exist. And then using it to get it videotaped and then cut that video up and use it for trial.
I am so interested in seeing how you do that.
That's something I'm perfecting now. Not perfecting, but I'm developing now.
I've seen Scribe.
Yeah.
And I haven't tried it yet, but apparently it's not admissible in Connecticut yet, so I hadn't, gone to that level.
It's not so admissible, but it's just a tool to gather stuff, but there's nothing that'll, you can obviously chop up deposition thing. You can ask people questions and put it on the screen for the court, and we have a projector that we bring to court, and we do that.
You're fancy.
Oh, yeah, but it works because the judge looks at it.
Right, because other people aren't doing that.
Right,
and it gets
then I have an
attention.
iPad, and then I circle stuff, and I can blow it up like a part of something of an email. Like, you said this. Boom, and then it explodes it on the screen. Judge looks at it.
That's exciting stuff.
It's exciting stuff, and nobody's
But
doing
nobody
it.
sees it, right? No, and do the judges know how to react to it?
No, but they will. I mean, they're gonna. I mean, they're humans, right? I mean, they're looking at a case, and they're gonna. The 2 most important things. Judge Solomon said this to me the other day. People always discount lawyers is likability and credibility.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right, because look, other than that, you're gonna end up here, right? But but I want to end up here for my client, and the other side wants to end up here, and if you find somebody we're humans, right? And I know judges are trained to sort of keep that out there, but if you come in and you're not an asshole and you're reasonable and you come across as the party that's like, look, they got divorced, maybe he cheated, but they don't really matter so much. That's a symptom of a broken marriage.
Right.
But seems like a decent dude. They're going to be predisposed to do things.
I was talking to a judge the other day. I'd had a couple of trials in front of this judge recently in a 2 or 3 month span. And they had both gone my way, which was nice. And I was very pleased with the results I'd gotten from my clients in both of these. And who was it? I think it was Dembo, Steve Dembo, Judge Dembo. I was speaking to him, and I took a tip from him, and I asked if I have 5 minutes with this judge, just in chambers. And I said, I want to know, we've had a couple trials together now, what do you think? And you don't have to answer now. Maybe you need to think about this for a while, but what do you think I'm doing well? And where could I improve?
Well, that's fantastic. Nobody does that. That's
right? I want to be an excellent trial attorney. Now, I hope that I can get as good results by settling
Yes.
But you can't get a good settlement unless you
You're
are fully
prepared.
prepared for
That's
trial
true.
and unless the other side knows that you are not just willing to try a case, but you'll be good at it when
you
you
do a
do.
lot of it.
And you do a lot of it, right? And you only get good at it by doing a lot of it. Or if you're in a phase where you're not doing a lot, go to trainings, do whatever you can to keep your trial skills fresh, to keep your knowledge of evidence. And so you're not spending time as you're preparing for trial going, how am I going to get that piece of evidence in?
That's right.
Right? You want to know that that text message and that rule of evidence required that you're allowed to put in context, not just the statement,
That's right.
So knowing those things and being fresh on them all the time, it is hard when most cases settle. And we want to save our clients the expense of a trial if we
Right.
can and get them as good a result. And sometimes, like you said, you've got 5 different judges in Hartford, you can get 5 different results. And that's a little scary. And it's hard for us to be able to advise our clients, is this a good settlement offer? Well, if we get this person, you're rolling the dice. If it's this person,
That's right.
I think you might get a better result over
You
here.
know, trial, it's like gambling.
Yeah.
And look, there's professional gamblers that make millions of dollars. That's what I always tell people. Like, listen, I gamble a lot, and I'm going to try to mitigate the risk so that the odds are in our favor, and and that's
Right.
what we do. But we talk about this in the office. We push this around. Who's a good family lawyer? I always say that. And Julie said to me the other day, like, how do you judge that? And I say, it's not just by their trial skills, because it can't be. It has to be, do they know how to take an off ramp, and do they try to take off ramps to get a result that they could look at and say, you know what, this is a good deal, because and they know when to throw the towel
Is
in
it
and
good
say,
enough for
right? Does it mitigate the client's risk sufficiently that the risk for trial and the trial expense is outweighed is mitigated by this offer on the table? And so, because you could be a great trial lawyer. We have friends that only that are like excellent trial lawyers, but they don't know how to settle a case for shit.
Right. But one
yeah.
of the other things about and this is where I wear 2 hats, right? So I'm a family law attorney, but I also did this random thing a couple years ago, and I am now the state
That's right. Yeah, we're going to get into the
right.
rep.
So, but that's a big part of what we're talking about, because I'm the state representative.
And you're on the Judiciary Committee.
I'm on the Judiciary
Right.
Committee,
Makes
right?
the rules, the laws. You amend 46B,
Right.
the family law
46B, things like
52.
Right,
yeah.
mostly 46B.
Right.
Now, we do lots and lots and lots of other things on Judiciary Committee.
Right.
We're doing the Trust Act amendment right now on immigration.
Oh, yeah,
There's
yeah.
some big federal things that are coming through our committee. That's another conversation entirely as well. But one of the things I am most passionate about on judiciary is judicial selection, because, like we're talking about, you can get 5 different results from 5 different judges in not just somewhere randomly in the state, but in the same courthouse.
That's right.
And that is, like, we want to be able to say to our clients confidently, here's a range of outcomes. But if you end up with a judge, and most of the time you end up with a judge who has had no family law experience, or no trial law experience, or there was some political favor somewhere.
Right.
And that does happen less and less, and I'm very vocal about that. Maybe to my detriment, but I'm very
No, it's a
vocal.
problem.
I'm very vocal about first of all, there's a commission in Connecticut called the Judicial Selection Commission. And it is a group of appointed people. Some of them are attorneys, some of them are not. And they're appointed by, the governor, the speaker, the president pro tem of the Senate. And they vet people who apply to become judges in the state of Connecticut. And there is a long history of them not, or only very, very rarely appointing family law attorneys. So they just don't approve the applications of family law attorneys, to the point where most family law attorneys don't even bother to apply to become a judge anymore, because they know you're not going to get approved. Sometimes they say it's because family law attorneys don't have jury trial experience. In my mind, yes, that's true. But A, if you're going to put them on the family law bench, who cares? And B, it is harder, in my view, to be a family court judge, because in family court, there is no jury. So you've got a judge who is not just determining what the correct law is based on the facts, but they're the fact finder. They're wearing 2 hats all day long in the court. So I think it is harder to be a family law judge. So you got somebody who's trying to find fact and figure out the law, and they've maybe never tried a case. They don't know what the rules of evidence are, maybe. They've had a little training now, but, last time they looked at it was law school as well. And they've got no family court experience. And while the overarching principles, best interest of the children, equitable division, you start getting into complex cases and it is nitty gritty, right? And there is case law about this. And it really matters. Did they both apply for sole custody, or is it one person wanted sole, one person wanted joint legal? Can you do joint legal when it's 2 applications for sole? And those are the kinds of things that make a difference in the outcomes of cases. So and there have been some excellent judges who have never practiced family law. And we just get really lucky that they happen to just get it. They get it. We've been really lucky on a couple of those that have come through Hartford recently.
Well, I think some of it has to do with the fact is they wind up going behind this. They walk in the back and they go to the presiding judge. Who's amazing.
Yes, he's phenomenal.
Amazing.
We're very lucky.
And has tons of experience, fair, takes care of lawyers.
Yes.
And they say, what do I do?
Right.
And that helps. And then if that person gets an aptitude and they're smart and they're humanistic, and they then pick it up.
Right.
But there's a couple when you get out of there.
Yeah. When you get lucky, it's great. When you don't get lucky, it can ruin people's lives.
It does. And of course, I always am asking 2 days before, who's our judge?
I know. I'm calling Gene.
Depending on who it is, because
maybe we're going to settle it.
Maybe I'll be more reasonable in the settlement, because I'm just
like,
I mean, sometimes I don't want. I got to be careful here because we have ethic rules I'm bound by. But like, there are times I'm just like, I literally have no idea the way the wind is going to blow here, so I have to really settle.
Right.
Because I look up the person, I'm like, they've never done any of this, and then I call my colleagues, and they're like, oh my God, like, what are you going to do? I'm like,
right.
So all right. So, but let's talk. I want to talk about a little bit. So, when you became a rep, you didn't win at first, right?
So, I got involved in this. I never thought I was getting an elected official. I ran for state senate like 10 years ago, only because I was on the legislative subcommittee of the family law section of the Bar Association. Okay. And that's when we had a big period of guardian ad litem reform. And so it was my job to go talk to my state rep and my senator and kind of educate them. And one of them had made a comment that sort of demonstrated that they didn't understand this area, and nor should they. They weren't a family law attorney. Why should they understand it? And it was my state senator at the time, and I couldn't get in touch with him. I called, I wrote, I stopped by, couldn't get in touch with him. And so I think I'd voted for the guy because 10 years ago, you could vote both ways. The world wasn't as polarized as it is now, and the stakes, frankly, weren't as high.
But as you know, state conservatives are different than federal.
Well, they used to be, right? Yeah. It's changing. So I looked up some of his votes, and I was really surprised because I thought he was a moderate. I was a moderate, and I saw some votes I really didn't agree with. So I kind of Googled, state senate Democrat 8th district, and I came up with the name of this guy, and I called and I said, wondering who's running against this person. I'd like to volunteer on their campaign. Well, that's how I ended up as a candidate the first time, because nobody would run against this guy.
What about you?
Yeah, nobody would run against the guy because my party had never elected anybody to that seat from my party. So we knew I was a sacrificial lamb, or at least they knew I was a sacrificial lamb. And I was passionate about this family law stuff, and I said, okay, fine, I'll do it. And then it became clear to me, like, this was not a district that back then could be won by my party. Got involved, did some town stuff. I served on the Charter Revision Commission. I served on zoning, and then I was pretty done with running for things, and I wasn't going to do it anymore. And suddenly, our state rep unexpectedly wasn't going to run again. And his seat came open, and I thought, well, that's just one town. When I was running for Senate, that was 11 towns. That was too much. I knew I couldn't do that at that time in my practice where I was. I thought, I can do that. But there was somebody else who wanted it too. And I said, game on. And they got the endorsement from the town committee.
That's a whole...
And it was during COVID, so there were certain rules that were getting changed, so I couldn't be on the ballot even though I got X%. So I literally had to go petition. Don't ask me why. And I don't like to lose, right? So I got petitions and I got signatures and I got on the ballot. And as a primary challenger, I won my primary.
Wow.
And I was the only member of my party who won a primary challenge in the entire state that year.
Because once that town commission speaks, that's it, right?
Yeah, but I've been, well, I guess not.
Well, I guess not. Until then.
Until then, right?
So
yeah.
You did that.
And then I won the general.
But, all right, so let me...
And then won again.
But when you didn't win the first time...
Yeah.
Like, how do you... Like, it's...
Well, winning is more fun than losing.
Sure, but like...
Right.
But getting up from a loss, that's tough.
So this is actually a friend of mine called, who was kind of high up in politics at the time, calls me the next day and
after your loss,
after my loss, and I was sort of mopey. Next day, the day after, he said, "What are you moping around about?" He said, "You lost a race you were never supposed to win. You've got like U.S. senators calling you, asking you to run again, and you know all these people, and you met a whole bunch of people, and you had a great time. What are you moping about? You were never supposed to win that anyhow." And it was such a different perspective for me. He said, like, you won all these other things. You gained all these other things by running. And from then on, it was just like, okay, you win some, you lose some. And it's been a very different perspective for me ever since then.
So I see. So then when you run again and you win, then you're like...
Then I found out that winning is more fun than losing.
It is more fun,
It is.
sure,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
And so then you become... So the state rep for which towns?
Simsbury, just Simsbury.
Is there only one state rep in Simsbury?
Yeah, and it's an unusual seat. I have only Simsbury and all of Simsbury. And up until this year, we now have somebody from my party in the state Senate seat, but we never had before. And so it was really just me. I am the delegation from Simsbury, right? But, so it's weird because you oftentimes have, like West Hartford's got, I think, 4 or 5 state reps who have at least a piece of it. Right. So you have a number of people advocating on behalf of West Hartford's interest. And it's just little old me for Simsbury.
So here's my question, because the name of my podcast is sort of interesting. It's called I'll Call My Guy. And I mean guy is, I know you'd give me shit on this. It's gender neutral.
No. I'm good. I'm good.
You're my gal. Yeah. But like, it's just like, I got a guy. But like, that was taken.
I got a guy for that.
But it was taken. It was trademarked. So
funny.
I have a trademark on I'll Call My Guy. But the point being is this. One of the things, the motif, I like to learn about people and what they do. But I always try to ask this, and it's important, I think, I'll call my guy underlying the leitmotif, if you will, as a theater and literature person, is relationships, right? Mm-hmm. And I have people on here that are chefs, and I talk to them about how do you build a relationship? You're in the back making food and have a menu. How do you build a relationship with someone you never talk to? You just serve them something. Mm-hmm. Now, yours is different because you're building a relationship door to door sometimes, or people that come in.
Oh, yeah.
But you don't always see all your constituents, and you're asking them to build a relationship with you and say, I endorse you. I want you to keep supporting what I want or what I think, we're a representative democracy. You go in and
you more often than not hear from the people who don't agree with you.
That's right.
Than the ones who do.
But how do you, like, to get reelected, and again, everyone has a different perspective on this, but how do you build that relationship with your constituents? Obviously, is it through the internet? Is it through town hall meetings? Is it knocking on doors? How do you do that?
So I think actually having run a few times and lost does a lot, because it shows people you're committed to something. Like there's something that you think that is important enough to keep trying for it. And that shows people there's a commitment. And it number one, it builds trust.
Interesting.
I do knock doors. I knock thousands and thousands and thousands of doors.
Wow.
Every year.
You just literally just get a map, or you just park your car in a neighborhood and go?
No, I've got a map. And I've got, we have a program that says, these are the registered voters, and
so you have some info,
these are the Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliated, and we have some sort of scoring system of how likely might an unaffiliated or even a Republican.
Right.
Maybe we've got a
Right,
Republican
because-
who cares about choice, or sorry, I'm a Democrat.
Yeah.
So we have some idea of where we should go knock. I'm not just like randomly knocking all 25,000 people in Simsbury.
Right, but we have that stuff has been. There's a lot of data on that.
There is, but you have to get them at home. They have to, like you enough. They have to agree with your core principles. But I think that there's nothing that will replace good old fashioned shoe leather, and I knock so many doors that I get to the point where I often walk in the morning for exercise. I don't do that during campaign season because I'm going to be getting my 10,000 steps easily on my.
You're knocking on someone's door. They open the door, and as you know, in our culture now, like somebody rings the doorbell, you run.
Right.
It used to be somebody would ring the doorbell,
and they can look at
like
you
if
on the
Sandy
ring
had somebody
doorbell.
Ring her doorbell, she's freaked.
Yeah, no,
Like,
and
somebody
they look
rings the
at
doorbell,
you.
I'm like, oh, who's there? I want to see who's coming in.
Right.
The young folks don't want anything to do with that.
They don't, and they look at you on their ring doorbell now, and they're either like, "Yeah, I'm good.
We've got fiber optic. Yeah.
Or they're like, "I got you, Melissa. Don't worry about it." They know me now. They're like, "Don't worry about it. We
You're
got
good.
you."
You're like-
Or they see you there and they don't answer the door. Or you come up to some place and it's got a ring doorbell, and even if they're not there, they can see you that you've been there, right?
Yeah.
So careful what you do,
Right.
But I think that all of the above, I think that social media is less and less helpful than it used to be because it is so permeated now.
Oh, right.
It's so permeated, and you're just the algorithm. You're living in your echo chamber.
Yeah.
You don't need to
right.
contact those people. You need to contact people
That
who
would consider voting going a different direction.
right, who might not know you, who
Or they're
might
fed up with what's going on nationally.
absolutely, or someone who's fed up locally about something,
Right.
right? Who might go the other way if you don't touch,
Is Simsbury, has it traditionally been a Republican town?
It was for many years a Republican town.
But a lot of younger families were moving in, so that
Younger
changed
families
the
moving in.
demographic.
We also have a number of apartment complexes that have been built. We like to think, we knocked so many doors and we were so good and convincing that we changed the demographic of Simsbury. Not so much. I think national things got so extreme, and Simsbury has always been, even if it were a moderate town, right? They're Yankee Republicans,
Right, right.
and national issues have become so extreme, and so many apartment complexes, which allowed so many younger people who tend more liberal than conservative.
That's right.
I think it was the confluence of those things.
I see.
And it's a pretty strong Democrat-held town now.
That happened I live in Farmington.
Yep.
And for years we couldn't get a high school built because everyone was so.
Oh, I remember.
What's the word? Parsimonious. Like they wouldn't, or miserly.
Yeah.
They wouldn't spend a dime.
Right.
Their kids are in college, but all the young families moved in, and then
eventually,
we knocked them out, and now we have a beautiful high school.
Right. But I'm a moderate Democrat.
Right.
I am. I wouldn't call myself fiscally conservative, but I want to be fiscally sensible.
Sensible, right.
I want to spend the money we need on Medicaid so that we help our most vulnerable population. I want to take care
We
of
don't
our
want to be
social.
India.
We don't want to be anywhere that doesn't take care of its neediest people.
That's right.
And for that, I'm a Democrat, but I'm also a small business owner, so I understand the ramifications of some of the proposals that come through the legislature that are very well-meaning, but they don't understand the ramifications of what it will do to small businesses.
Yeah.
And small businesses are the backbone of our economy in Connecticut.
That's true.
There's a big push. The Connecticut Bar Association has been lobbying on behalf of association healthcare plans. Because attorneys are self-employed, and unless they're married to somebody who's got a healthcare plan, it's sort of scary. Like, what are you going to do for health insurance sometimes? And there are these association healthcare plans, which very well-meaning people don't want to have enacted.
Why?
I want to be
Very
really careful.
cynical
I want to
about
be really
insurance
careful
companies,
about.
man, because
I want to be really careful
I'm
about
very
that.
cynical
No, but
about
an
them.
association healthcare plan would just allow, say, the bar association to
right.
allow us to buy into it like somebody who was unionized gets their
What's
health
wrong with
insurance.
that?
So that's a very good question. Other than that, there are some people who don't want that because they want there to be a public option.
Oh, I see.
And so they don't want to expand things because they want that to be the option. But as a result, when my health insurance costs go up as a small business person, my costs to my clients go up.
Oh, it's very expensive.
So it's very expensive, and it has these domino effects, right? So I'd say that's probably where I get myself in the most trouble at the legislature,
Well, but I mean,
because my party isn't as business oriented, and I'm not talking big business. If you are a large corporation and you have the resources, you should absolutely be providing. But we don't want to impose so many regulations that we keep people from growing.
That's right.
That we keep people
you gotta
from
you gotta find a, and that's part of the
Right.
Which I think probably makes you a very good legislator in terms of reaching compromises. Well, because divorce attorneys have to be, you have to learn how to get two people that hate each other together to reach a compromise.
Right.
And that's
politics,
a special skill.
But politics is like high conflict divorce now.
Right.
And they don't want a mediated solution. There is the left, there is the right, and those of us in the middle who want compromise, we're like the kids in the middle of a high conflict divorce.
You're like, Mom and Dad, stop it.
Exactly.
We just want peace.
We just want peace. We want, make some compromises.
Right. And move on.
Think about us, right? Think about us.
That's interesting. That's an interesting metaphor.
Yeah, I was thinking about writing a column on that.
No, that is true. That's actually an excellent column to write about how the people in the middle are the kids in the divorce.
Absolutely.
And the kids are like the majority of the American public. Like, wait a second here. Like, you guys are insane. Like, what's happening here? You just you hate each other more than you love us.
I mean, within the base of the country, there is very left and very right. I don't want to equate very right with what is happening federally.
That's not right.
That's not right. That's
insane.
a destruction
Insanity.
of our. That's
That's not like.
I saw some TikTok thing. It's a hostile government takeover.
Look,
right?
as you know, I grew up, I was in college. I went to college in D.C., American University. I was very politically active. I was a young Republican. I was Contract with America, 1990. I was big into that. When the Republicans took over in 94, I partied with Newt Gingrich and all those people. I was like a young college. But you know what? I joke with my friend now.
I won't tell anyone.
No. But this is, I publicly say this.
Yeah.
Like the people that are, all my friends that were we were partying there, that I'm still very close with, my fraternity brothers. I sort of jokingly text them on a group text the other day. I said, you know what? The stuff that's happening in Washington now is the stuff that we would do as kids if they gave us the keys to the Capitol.
Right. Right.
Cut that shit, slice this, chop this. These people are lazy
Yeah.
And that's what they would. This is like kids doing stuff.
Yeah.
People that don't have a frontal lobe.
Yeah,
developed.
but those people are doing it for oligarchs.
But now all of my friends that were in there, every one of us is a progressive liberal person because we've lived a life.
Right.
And even though we've all do well financially and successfully, we see how the world is. We've traveled the world. We've had our families, and we said, "This is not right. That's not. It's not like you're negotiating with Bob Dole, where you can sit down and say, look, we have fundamental difference, but I'm not going to call you names. I'm going to say, Melissa, we have a difference of opinion politically. I'm just pretending I'm some right wing guy." But I like you, and I'm not going to go on TV or on Twitter and say Melissa's got a pea brain.
But that's what they do now. That is what they do now.
Talks like that.
And the shame of it is that right now that's some of that's going on locally in Simsbury from the other side, and they call people disgraceful. They call them pathetic.
We could disagree.
But my Republican lawmakers, my colleagues in the other party at the legislature, we have excellent working relationships. So, in Hartford, we have an ability to work together. And it is the base in the parties, which is really unusual right now, right? But it is the base in the parties. They're keeping, and maybe I have an excellent working relationship with them because I'm a moderate, and they know that I'm not going to go.
Regardless of it, you can't take it out. Because imagine we're working together in court, and I send an email out and say, Melissa, if you would just stop with your radical left wing and whatever, and your pea brain could get this through your head, you'd be like,
well, we have some colleagues who will do those things,
But I've had somebody do that, and I call them up and I said, listen, that's
no.
a no.
Yeah.
We've got to treat each other with dignity.
That's over the line.
We have to treat each other with dignity. We can disagree, but you cannot lose that professionalism. You have to treat each other. We're human beings, man.
Yeah.
And and it's completely, you have the leader of a nation like saying things that are just like wildly disordered.
If you're
It normalizes that craziness.
if you're trying to get people elected, why garner sympathy for the other side? Why not be effective at that? Concentrate on what is effective.
Right, but what bothers me is if I say, and I pound my chest and say, this isn't normal. Like how is this? I'm speechless. Like, how do you treat people like this? I don't know. Anyhow.
So that's sort of a fascinating question, because I think, the Democratic Party is asking itself, how could that have occurred that we have accepted that?
We were asleep at the switch.
What have we done
asleep at the switch.
that has allowed people to prefer that happening?
That's right.
What, we got to look at ourselves too. Like, what are we doing?
Well, because
makes that a preferable outcome.
Chris
to
Murphy's
some
been
people.
great on this, and he said we were too busy catering to the fringe of our party.
As I said, it's a high conflict divorce.
It's a
and
high
the rest of
conflict
us
divorce.
are stuck.
That's correct.
The rest of us are stuck.
That's right. Wow. All right. So you have a lot. So what's hot at the legislature now? Like so
my committees, I sit on general law, judiciary, and the government administration and elections committee.
Okay.
And I'm the vice chair of that committee, and I'm an assistant majority leader as well. And so my committees are late committees, and we're just really getting going on our public hearings and our JF days, which is joint favorable. The last day you can pass bills out of committee. So on general law, we do consumer protection, we do cannabis, hemp, alcohol.
Okay.
We're doing AI. The AI bill is a big deal.
You know what's a big one too, and I'll talk to you this offline. The towing bill. You know about this?
Oh yeah.
I sent you.
Yes.
I'll have to tell you more about that.
There's a bill coming up.
It's good.
It is.
The
yes.
towing people are.
Yes. I was going to do it, but I saw somebody else do it. So
no. But the towing people are completely lobbying against it because it
of course.
redoes the 1970s laws
Right.
because those guys are crooks. And I'll say it.
They're making a good profit off of it.
Oh yeah, you're right. Well, they're getting cars worth $28,000. You read the Dave Altamari's articles on this. Dave has been a person on here, and you can connect the dots, obviously. But but yeah, so like they were literally like they're taking these cars, they're selling them so they can cut the line. It's a wild thing. But so you don't do that stuff. That's transportation, right?
That's transportation, but eventually it'll come out to the floor,
right.
Hopefully.
You'll have to vote on it.
On judiciary, we do not just family law, and there really isn't much going on family law this year. We do have a uniform mediation and a uniform collaborative act that I believe will be voted on this year.
Oh, that's wonderful. I got to look at that. Yeah.
And we have a bunch of, bills about criminal law that are coming up, and there's this ongoing issue about, can police pull people over when they smell marijuana? Right now, they cannot.
Yeah.
And should they be able to?
Right, because it's legal.
It's legal. Should they be able to when you can actually drive with an open container? I personally feel, you
can drive with an open container.
I'm not going to talk about it because it's a bill that's coming up that I'm going to have to vote on.
Right.
So I don't want to prejudice anything on that yet.
Yeah.
Because you never know how bills are going to end up. And that's another thing. A bill you vote for in committee, you might be voting for it just to get it out on the floor, knowing it's a work in progress, knowing there are going to be amendments to it still. Or you might vote for something wholeheartedly in committee, and then an amendment ends up at 2 a.m. on the floor, and you have to end up voting against it because the thing was added is so you don't want that more than you want the thing that you wanted that was in the other bill.
Right.
So that's sort of a favorite, slip in an amendment and get you to vote against an amendment that kills a bill that you really wanted. Right.
I see.
So, that's the politics of it. But I think on a basis that people might be really interested in right now, we have something called the Trust Act in the state of Connecticut.
Okay. What is that?
And that is the law that doesn't allow law enforcement to cooperate with ICE, doesn't allow them to honor a civil detainer from ICE unless there's, a serious felony conviction, that sort of thing. And there are amendments from both parties offered. The Democrats have offered a bill that would expand that prohibition to all state agencies and not serious felonies, but specifically just A and B felonies. And the Republicans have offered a bill that would allow cooperation with ICE for civil detainers, as opposed to judicial warrants, by the way, which is what the Democratic bill says, if it's just an arrest for an A, B, or C felony.
I see.
So that garnered a lot of testimony at the Capitol. And that one goes to the crux of some of the federal issues that we're dealing with right now, and goes to the how far can we go on some things without losing our Medicaid funding for our most severely developmentally disabled people, and what is the balance? And we're going to pass a budget this year that will probably be back in September, because the federal will pass our budget in June. The federal government passes its budget in August.
Who knows what that's
and who knows what that's going to be? And do we lose a whole bunch of state funding? What happens? Are we going to be back and have to redo it all over again?
Wow.
So it's a very unusual year. Yeah.
So you got a lot of stuff. So I could spend hours with you, but this this has been great. I learned a lot, and certainly your origin story now, as I sort of process it, I understand you. I understand how you did what you did, because it's it's like
I know how to pivot.
You know how to pivot,
and I know
right?
how to hustle.
And you know how to hustle, right? You have that, you have
that drive,
the drive, and the New York thing, and that training from Weil Gotshal up through Deckert, and both of us sort of doing that transactional work and then pivoting and doing this type of work. Again, I always feel a special connection to you, because we both have that background. And we both have done it. We will make a good living doing this.
And I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg. Like, was it the big law training that made me somebody who is almost pathologically driven to do things right, the right way, and do it the most good and the most right?
Right.
Or is it that I am a person who's naturally wound that way, and therefore big law was such a good fit for me, right?
Yeah. It's very, I still am, I'm going to continue to process that myself, but I do know that this is a better fit for you. It's certainly a better fit for me. I enjoy it. I love my job.
And it was like, it's like a whole other career,
It's
right?
a whole other career.
And that's the nice thing about the law. If you ever get bored, well, just switch to something else.
Well,
Explore something else.
A lot of people are afraid to fail. And you can't be afraid to fail.
Right.
You got to do it and figure it out.
Somebody once said about me, I'm not afraid of failure or success. So
That's right. Well, and as you know, as a small business owner, we'll end with this: success will kill you faster than failure. So you always got to watch that too.
Amen.
So anyhow,
Amen.
thank you.
So good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye.